Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Chase, and today I'm going to teach you how to shred. So, before we get started, let's just make sure that we're in tune together. Today I'm actually in E, which is your standard tuning for guitar. So I'm going to go ahead and play a string and you can tune along. Alright, now that we've got that taken care of, let's break into the lesson. So your foundation of shredding, how this works is we're going to start with your right hand, because that's what's most important here. If you can play this one note at top speed, this is your building block to playing fast. So we'll pick any note. Out of simplicity, I'm going to play E right here at the 12th fret, and we're going to just play this one note as fast as we possibly can. So that will sound like this. And that's a good little exercise, so to speak, because you can really hone your speed and push yourself, because you're not having to worry about anything else but speed. So you can even get going a little slow and then just crank into it. As a side note, this is a great way to warm up. In my opinion, one of the best ways to warm up your right hand. No need to overcomplicate it. More important than speed, we're looking for consistency. Now, if you're having trouble doing this, a couple of little quick tips is you want to kind of anchor your hand somewhere. Some people like to use like a finger on the guitar, a pinky or ring finger or all three fingers to kind of brace, and it gives you an anchor to kind of pivot off of. Me personally, I use the backside of my hand on the bridge. So I want to note really quickly, do not move the pick with your fingers. Don't wiggle or move anything like that. Keep your fingers locked into place. And then the motion can come from a number of places. I'm somewhat of an elbow picker. I kind of move at the elbow and then I tense my wrist and hand up. You're not doing the death grip on your pick over here. That can actually make it harder. But yeah, you want somewhat of a rigid form. Experiment around, find what works for you. Sometimes some movement from the wrist helps. You have some people that they're almost all wrist, no elbow. But I do use a combination of the two. So here's what the elbow looks like. So kind of bracing this part of my hand / wrist on the strings or on the bridge, and then my arm is resting on the guitar as well, and I'm just kind of like wiggling at the elbow. From the wrist, it would look like this, more of a... And what I've found is the fastest players seem to go more from the elbow. That being said, when you get to shredding across the strings, sometimes it's easier to go from the wrist because it makes changing the strings a little easier. So what this little exercise is showing us is what your potential picking speed is. So something I've learned from Michelangelo Badio, one of the best shredders of all time. So we've got our potential picking speed. This is also referred to as the tremolo picking. And you can experiment around with changing notes now that you've got that down pat. A fun one is a lick from Eruption. You can do that too. But you're just looking for that really focusing on the right hand, getting that fluid motion. And as I talked about consistency earlier, you want this to sound as even as possible. It's not going to sound perfectly even because we have upstrokes and downstrokes, which sound different. But you don't want a lopsided sound, which is kind of like... you want it to be as even in volume as possible. And what I like about this is you can really just concentrate on what you're doing and experiment around. Practice with how you're holding the pick, how hard you hold the pick, the angle of the pick. It does help to have a slight down angle. What that downward angle looks like is this. I tend to pick with the upward angle sometimes, which helps and hurts. So you want to be able to do both. That looks like this. This is the downward motion. So practice both angles. Practice changing notes as you're doing this. And once you have that down pat, now we can learn to shred. Okay, so our first actual shredding, so to speak, is going to be a little pattern on one string. And I recommend you learn how to shred on one string first. Get good at that. Then learn how to go into going across your strings using 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 strings, however many strings you choose to have on your guitar. So here's our lick. We're going to start with your pinky at the 15th fret. And then we're going to go to the 12th fret, 14th fret, back to the 15th fret, 14, 12. So I'll just play this slowly. It might be easier for you to just watch. So you take that same motion. It might help you once you get going with that to like slow it down, but don't change what you're doing. And just use that same motion and then play your lick. Then you will slowly start to speed this up. So that'll look kind of like this. And one thing you can play around with is try not to focus on every single note. Try to just synchronize your hands together. And then use what I call an anchor, or like a landing mark. So that can be like when you play the 15th fret, like the start of the lick, you're trying to land that every time. And you might say, that, okay, that's a downstroke. So you can kind of tap your foot, and you know that that's like, if you're hitting that, the rest of the notes kind of fall into place. Now, you don't want to get sloppy with this now, but these are just some tricks to kind of help you learn how to do it. Because sometimes it's hard to go from walking to running. So you can kind of just jump into it and start running sometimes. You know, it's you can walk and you can run. It's getting that transition from one to the other that can be a little difficult. So I want you to have that feeling of what it feels like to shred. And if it's a little sloppy, then you can go back and clean it up. We don't want to be sloppy. We don't want to just get your left hand going crazy and your right hand going crazy and then not match up. You do want them to be synchronized. But using this picking technique is really what's most important. And then you start getting your left hand going with it. Another great thing that you could do is separate the two. So practice doing this lick with just your left hand. You can do this with a different fingering too. So you know if you can do that fast, and you can pick fast. In theory, you should be able to play that fast, but sometimes it just takes some work of synchronizing your hands together. So start slow, build into it, and really get that feeling of what it feels like when you're going fast, what your right hand feels like, and then replicate that as you start to speed up. Because a lot of people play differently when they play slow. So you want that same feeling, and then just push yourself. And then if you know your scales, you can do this in different positions. And it's what's cool is like this pattern, you know, it works anywhere. It's really the sequence. It's 6 notes on one string. And so you can really arrange that however you want. And the more ways, the better, because then you have more licks to choose from. And I don't want you to steal all my licks. I don't want you to go around playing like me. I want you to go around playing like you. But a couple other that I still mess around with to this day is you play your scale and just play it twice. You go the other direction. Alright, so phase 2. We've learned how to shred on one string. You can, there's way more ways to do this than what I've shown you, but just to keep this video as short as I can, here's just a few to get you going. But most importantly, we're playing an even amount of strokes on this string. It's 6 notes. So you do 2, 4, 6, 8. What's most important is that we end on an upstroke so that when you hit your next string, it's on a downstroke. This makes everything uniform and easy. And when you have that downward pick motion that I showed you, how your pick's kind of angled towards the floor slightly, it makes changing strings much easier. So we're going to do that same pattern. Just go down to your next string. We are in our E minor scale. That's what we're going to be using for right now. So we have our lick here. Then go down to your next string. And you can kind of just say on one string, get going, swap to the next one, get going on that one, swap back. We're not trying to jump back and forth yet. We're just trying to practice that initial hop from one string to the next. So that way you can kind of get the feeling of it. But to really practice something, you want to isolate down to what we're trying to practice. So right now, if we're trying to practice changing strings, we want to do just that. So now we're going to go back and forth between 2 strings. And if you're having trouble with this, one thing I like to do is make it easier on yourself. So you can go to a different position. So we're still technically in E minor, but you can get on here to your G major type shape where you're playing the same pattern on each string. So you're not having to think about changing fingerings or anything. It stays the same, and you can really just focus on changing strings. So that looks like this. Alright, cool. So now you know what it feels like to go back and forth between your strings. So now we can go all the way across all 6 strings. We're going to really go for it here. So once again, we are in E minor. If you don't know your scales yet, you might want to go back, learn your scales and stuff, because this is a little more advanced. So that looks like this. I'll play it slow once. And fast. Alright, cool. And you also may want to practice going the other direction as well. But one thing that tripped me up when I was learning this is you're doing good down here at the bottom, going between two strings. So you would think that it's the same thing going across all of them, right? And technically it is. But you'll start messing up as you get to your lower strings. And that's for two reasons. One of them is your left hand positions like having to change. You're having to like open up wider and you have to change and shift. And that's why, so it's your left hand holding you back, which happens more often than not. People think one thing's holding them back and it's something else. Or it's string tracking. Now, string tracking is just where you're anchored at. So like, if I'm down here anchored at this position, picking, and then as I'm having to like move the pick up to the lower strings and I'm still anchored down here, the angle of my pick and everything changes. So to keep it the same, you're literally just moving your hand across the bridge, or at least that's how I do it. So as I'm down here picking, I'm kind of sliding my hand ever so slowly up just so that I keep the mechanics the same in my hand and wrist and elbow. So I'll turn sideways so you can see a little better. It's a very slight change. I'm just barely moving up so that I'm not down here picking like this and then having to like stretch my fingers up here. You know, I'm exaggerating right now, but that's kind of what's happening when you're not string tracking properly. Just kind of move in that position. Now I will try to show you what it looks like when you're doing it wrong. Sometimes I try to just keep the good habits and it's hard to do it wrong, so I'll try. See right there, I'm starting to have trouble because I'm not moving my hand up. See, I'm having to really turn forward and like bend my wrist. You want to make it easy on yourself. So when I'm anchoring, I'm not like digging down into the guitar as tight as possible. You know, I'm anchored down just hard enough so that I can pivot, but soft enough so that I can still kind of slide. And this shift probably isn't more than an inch or so. It's like I said, it's very subtle. Here's what it looks like properly. Alright, and I will try to do a close-up for you real quick. So see how my hand ends up here and starts down here. Alright, by no means is this everything, but this is your definitive guide on how to get started with your shredding. If you're new to this will probably shave off at least a year or two of figuring it out. I know it took me a long time to stumble upon some of this stuff, and really the biggest breakthrough I had was the potential picking speed. Learning how to pick that one note really fast, and most importantly, taking that motion and slowing it down and breaking it apart and figuring it out. because I was playing differently when I was going slow. Then I'd get fast, I was doing it right. And so I had trouble building up and playing at moderate tempos. When you're playing fast and you're playing it right, that's your optimum technique. So you want to be able to dissect that, figure out what you're doing right, and then slow it down, break it down, and then play like that all the time. So the potential picking speed, that was, breakthrough number 1. And then breakthrough number 2 was like this downward kind of tilt to the pick. And the reason why is when you finish with an upstroke, you escape the plane of the strings. So when you're changing strings, it allows you to come back down with that downstroke without getting your pick caught in the strings. And when you're playing an odd number of notes per string, like 3 notes per string, it's really easy to get caught in the strings because you're alternating between upstrokes and downstrokes when you change. And I'll do another lesson on that at some point in time. That's highly advanced. But you tackle that with a whole separate bag of tricks and tools. So this will get you started. Start with your building blocks, get your solid foundation, and then we will get you shredding on to more technical stuff. So I am Chase West from the Velcro Pygmies. I hope you enjoyed this guitar lesson. Keep rocking and rolling and get to shredding as fast as you can. If you got value from this video, I ask that you please give me a like and a subscribe. Those are the buttons down below on this page on YouTube. The like looks like a thumbs up, and the subscribe is the red bar. And that subscribe will allow you to see more videos like this, and the like helps me out because what it does is it helps this video show up in the related videos. It helps people search for stuff for this video to come up. So if this helped you, I ask that you please help me in return by just clicking a couple buttons for me. Thanks, y'all. Y'all keep rocking and rolling now. I'll see you in the next video.